Morning. Good afternoon. Comment allez-vous? Comment ça va? Assalamu alaikum. Ni hao. Privet. This is Musa, Matt Meacham Jr. signing in. Well, I did a little homework, not much. I searched the internet and I see that they're having issues in Europe. I'm going to focus on Europe. And since I know very little about South America, all I know is the country of Brazil. I have a relative that is from Chile. Um, and I've never been south of the border. That is south of the border of the USA. I've never been to Mexico, even though I would go to El Paso, Texas, all the time when I used to live in Texas. And it's called the Rio Grande. That's the border between Mexico and the U.S. And it's on the Tex it's in Texas on the Texas borderline. So I've never been in South America, Mexico, and where I have traveled through Europe. I don't. Okay, I've been to I think Belgium and yeah, it's another country I went. I was traveling through Europe. This it's a very small country, but I've been to two European countries, and I've been to let's see, Turkey, and I've been to okay, uh, I can't think of the country. That country is very popular. It's a Western country. It's right there next to Arabia. It's right next to. I can't think of that country. So I've I've lived most of my life in U.S. and a quarter of my life I've lived in Africa. Now I've lived in four different African countries. I studied um, at the University of Ibadan in Nigeria under the renowned. I think I think he's still alive. And I don't even think he even remembers me, but I was one of his students. But Mr. Wale Shoyinka, he was the first African to win a Nobel Prize in Literature. He was my uh, uh, advisor, yes, in 1971, Mr. Wale Shoyinka. I learned a lot from him. From that was a very interesting experience in Nigeria. And it was in Nigeria was the reason that I wanted to come back to Africa. I had a friend when I came to Africa. I had a friend who went to East Africa. He went to Kenya, and I went to Nigeria. And when we got back to the U.S., he told me he had such a good time in East Africa. So I said that one day I'm going to go to East Africa. So I ended up going to Kenya, and I spent I spent at least 10 years in Kenya. That means I must like Kenya was is a very nice. It's a very nice place to be. A very nice. It's a beautiful country, and people there speak English, and so it was easy to you know do things in Kenya. But many places that I go in Africa, people speak English, and that's what I want to talk about today. English. Now, let's look at what's happening in Europe. And it's when my observations only just began just a few, I guess a few, maybe a month, maybe a few weeks ago when I began surfing the internet and I saw that they were having riots in England. And the thing is, okay, I have to do more studying, and some things I say now may be in error. And if they are in error, I'll correct them at a later time. But I talk according to my observation. Now, most of the world, most of the people, most of the civilized world, well, except for South America, where am I going? What am I getting ready to say now? Most of the world speaks English. Most of the world. I didn't say all of the world. I'm saying most of the world speak English. Now, if we the look at Europe, and let's say that I would call it the Eastern Hemisphere. Okay, Europe, and then you come all the way down to Africa. Um, a lot of people speak English. Okay, now if we go across the Atlantic Ocean and go well in the U.S., Canada, most people speak English. But when we go to South America, then people either speak English or not much English, not much English, but they either speak Spanish or Portuguese. Brazil, that's a very large country in South America, and these people speak Portuguese in Brazil. So in South America, most people speak Spanish, and you got the big country of Brazil where people speak Portuguese. Now, something is going on in Europe right now at this very day. Uh, I have to do more studying to understand what is going on in Europe. I don't see it. I don't understand much as to what's going on there. But I want to give my 2 cent discussion on Europe. Okay, Nazism is raising up in Europe today. And in many countries in Europe, they don't want Muslims, people who are Muslims. They don't want these people, they don't want Muslims in their countries. If and the thing is, okay, let me just put this aside. Now, they then the discussion is they don't want Muslims and then they don't want Africans. Okay? But then there's another discussion that you hear. They don't want Jews and they don't want blacks. So no matter who, what it is, the blacks are always the ones that they don't want. Okay, I want to talk about Michelangelo. I think Michelangelo was an Italian. Now you don't have many countries speaking Italian. Now, the Italians, they went into Ethiopia and took a part of it, but I think that's all that the Italians were able to do when they began. You had this, it became a racial thing where you had the Portuguese, the French, the English, all of the white people in Europe, they came together. And what they did was they came together to take over the world. And well, they were civilized and they were in God fearing. And they did. They took over the world. The world began, no matter where you go in the world, in general, no matter where, at one point in history, no matter where you would go in the world, you would see Anglo-Saxons or white people. And generally, when you would go in these parts of the world, and it's reflected even today. Look at as we, the languages we speak are all Anglo-Saxon or Western European. Most of the languages spoken in the world are basically from Europe, which means that the Europeans did a lot of traveling on this earth, and they made many places on this earth their home. Okay, what's going on now is it seems like it's in a reawakening of the of this whole idea of this. Okay, I may be using the wrong terminology, but by using this terminology, I think we can understand each other. It may not necessarily be the white Anglo-Saxon, but it is the white skinned human being. It seems like these guys are going back to something that they used to do. This whole thing about by their being white, that makes them right. And by your being black, then you step back. And by your being brown, you stick around. This color issue, this color issue. Again, if you had my if you had watched one of my previous discussions, I informed or indicated to you that the whole idea of racism uh, based on color, it evolved from the small country of Portugal, the very the small country of Portugal. A small country like Portugal goes to South America and take over a big country like Brazil, a small country like Portugal that goes into Africa and takes over a big country like Angola, Mozambique. But the British, the English speaking people, they were able to go everywhere with the exception of South America, Canada, US, what we call the US today, Africa, China, Japan, India. So these white people were able to go into these lands and they made these lands their home. They made these lands their home. And the people of those lands became their servants. The people of these exotic lands became their slaves. Why? Why? That's something that we have to study. We have to study. But I want to go back to Michelangelo. Yeah, Yes, I skip from one subject to another. I don't give my broadcast from a script. I just give my broadcast. And when they come out, well, whatever comes out of my oral cavity is what comes out of my mouth. So why were the Europeans, why were the Western, Russia, these are white people in Russia. I'm sure that they had, I'm sure there was some type of social mechanism which would be, we would assign as being a form of slavery. I'm sure they had that type of a social mechanism within their institutions. But see, I don't know too much about Russian history, but if there were slavery in Russia, then that slavery was not based on the color of a man's skin. They made that it only became an issue in Western Europe. That's when they began to say slavery was based on the color of a man's skin. I know when I was growing up in racial, under racial segregation in USA, in Alabama, there was a saying that we children would say when we played. It was something like this is how it went. If you are white, you are all right. If you are black, step back. If you are brown, stick around. So that thing about color, it was a Western European implementation. And it's quite interesting that, when we really do serious and honest research, we find that every human being came from a human being who was necessarily black. Everybody has their theories, and some of us have the facts. But now this whole idea of racialism is beginning to find growth and development in Europe. Why? When we think about, this whole idea of uh, uh, humanity being based on the color of a man's skin, it originated in Western Europe. It was a group thing. I mean, all of these white Europeans came together and said, look, we are going to be the rulers of the world, and we must stick together. And they did. And they did. But it was only for a period of time. Only for a period of time. And now it's time for these ideas, these Western ideological ideas, it's time for us to put them aside. It's time for us to put them in a corner. It is a time for us to move away from this ideology. I want to get back to Michelangelo. Michelangelo was a white Italian, brilliant artist. He began to paint history. And that white European mind made everything that was good white and everything that was bad black. And Michelangelo did a good job. Jesus wasn't white. Even Putin, the Russian, he says, he confesses, he admits that Jesus was a black man. But the whole thing that changed the color of humanity, changed the cover, excuse me, that changed the color of the skin. It started with Michelangelo. Michelangelo began to paint all those great black people who they knew were black people. They made all of them be white people. Then the Portuguese came and they said, let's make all black people slaves. And that's where we at. 400, 500 years ago, all this happened. And then came a man called Hitler. And now you have a movement called Nazism that's rising up again in Europe. But before it rises again, before it rises again, there will be a nuclear fallout. And all those devils who were trying to rewrite history, who are determined to keep the world in bondage and blind, you will be destroyed by your own instruments. You will be destroyed by your own evilness because you're wrong. You are wrong. White supremacy must be destroyed. This is Musa Ahmed Beecham Jr. signing off on Earth.